The only gods I used to pray to were the Steel Gods. Last week I finished Steel Gods, the second book in the Great Silence by Richard Swan, and it's another banger to the surprise of no one. Richard Swan just continues to be an author who I appreciate deeply, because when I want something that's good, when I want something that I'm going to enjoy, when I know for a fact I'm not going to be let down, this dude seems to just be like my ace in the hole at this point. And what's really crazy is how fast this guy writes. I'm pretty sure he's got another book coming out in August, and after that, like, Blood Dynasty's probably not going to be that far away either. So again, Richard Swan, just I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, you're amazing, and this book is amazing. And honestly, at this point, if you've seen my other reviews for any of his books, whether it be from the Empire of the Wolf trilogy or Grave Empire, which is the first book in the Great Silence, you probably know what I'm going to say, all right? You know I'm going to say that the action was awesome, which it was. This is a flintlock dark fantasy adventure story. There is fighting with guns in this. There are fighting with swords in this. There are alternative worlds and an afterlife in this. There are demonic presences in this. There's a kaiju fight in this. There is a Pirates of the Caribbean World's End scene with a bunch of ships fighting each other as the world falls apart around them in this. There is demonic catmen, there are wolfmen, there are mermen riding giant sharks and whales in this. There is just everything a dark fantasy fan like me wants in their stories. It's got the fantasy aspect, it's got the gritty aspect, it's got a little modicum of hope and, like a little modicum of like light in there, just enough for you to feel like there's some sense of maybe these characters can make it out of here. But there's also plenty of violence, plenty of cursing, plenty of blood, and quite a good sense of gallows humor in this. I'm not going to say that Richard Swan is as funny as Joe Abercrombie, but if you like Joe Abercrombie's sense of humor, that kind of looking death in the face and like smiling sense of humor, if you like crude, like curse heavy like jokes, this I think is really going to work for you. And at this point, I'm not really sure what else to say about these books that I haven't said before. So it's going to be a lot of me repeating myself, but I think that really shows the mark of a great author. First of all, the characters here are absolutely wonderful. All three POVs, and you actually get a few more in this, are really fun to follow, but especially the main villain point of view. You get a lot of him in this, and he is such a fun character to follow because he is so deeply detestable. He is a character that you're going to love to hate. He is kind of in the same, I wouldn't know if he's as hateable as somebody like Joffrey from Game of Thrones, but he's like almost there. Like, he is a truly despicable person, but he's also literally going insane in this one. And that makes it really, really fun to read. Like, this book, if I could actually summarize in one word, is insane. This book feels like a dark fantasy fever dream. Like, waking up in a cold sweat and asking, what did I just read? That is how this book feels. The scale of this one is absolutely epic. We're introduced to an entire two new factions. One that we're already kind of familiar with, which is the enemy empire directly opposed to Sova. It's this other kingdom in the same region. They kind of have this French thing going on where the Sovans are kind of British and this other empire is kind of French, but also kind of Germanic. It doesn't really matter. And then we get this new introduction of an obviously Asian-inspired fantasy world that is heavily implied to be like Japanese or Chinese, I would say. At least Islander of some sort. I would say Japanese specifically, though, just because of how it's described. And that faction in itself is also very, very cool, and they add a lot more to the world. And that's really something that happens a lot here, is the world expanding massively. The scope of the problem becomes rapidly very huge, and you very quickly realize that what you think is going on is actually a much grander scale issue that leads to this whole like holy war afterlife issue going on that has been touched upon in the Empire of the Wolf trilogy. So honestly, I would really strongly recommend you read Empire of the Wolf trilogy and then read this, because you'll have greater context for why this is happening, how this has happened before, and how these heroes might overcome this issue. Because we got like princes of hell, we've got angels, we've got an entire afterlife cosmos thing going on top of the regular human interactions and human tribalism that is also happening. So it's like a lot, there's a lot of elements going into this. And despite all those elements going into this, Richard Swan keeps this book very lean and very tight. There is enough content in these books, each of them, in Empire of the Wolf trilogy and in this trilogy so far, to be like a 6-book saga in themselves. Like, there's enough content there to explore in great detail to be a much longer series, and yet Richard Swan keeps it very tight and very focused. And I really, really, really appreciate that. This story could be a lot larger. It could be a lot more epic. It could explore all these other ideas, but it's keeping it very tight, and I think it's actually benefiting from that. It's really keeping the story and the plot focused. And I'm curious to see what he will do in Blood Dynasty, and if he will then set up another trilogy set further in the future, because I feel like these issues can continue to be resolved and will not be resolved by the end of the trilogy. But again, who knows? The plot is really fun though. The characters are really fun. The action set pieces in here are like crazy. They're insane. No spoilers, but there's like a borderline kaiju fight in this one, and if that doesn't pique your interest, I don't even know why you're following me. Like, I'm just saying, like, kaiju fights are like the coolest thing ever. It's very kind of reminiscent of like Pirates of the Caribbean, with how much sailing's going on in here, especially like World's End and Dead Man's Chest. That's actually the vibe that I would describe this book is, like Dead Man's Chest, especially like the Davy Jones scenes that are like really dark and like really kind of like borderline graphic, and it's surprising that my parents let me see those movies at like 9 years old. Anyways, that's not the point. The point is that Steel Gods is a very fun time. If you're a dark fantasy fan, especially somebody who is a fan of stuff like Joe Abercrombie's First Law, George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, or Steven Eriksen's Malazan Book of the Fallen, and you have for some reason not checked this out, you really are doing yourself a disservice, because I really genuinely believe that Richard Swan is one of those up-and-coming authors who a lot of us are going to be talking about in the next few years, because he is extremely talented. He has a great sense of humor. He knows how to balance action and character development. He knows how to keep his plots concise. They don't feel overwrought, but they're also just deeply entertaining in a dark, nasty sort of way. So I'm going to give this one like an 8.8 out of 10. It's another banger.